conversation will rule the nation on face-to-face basis when we blast off. It's real on the dance floor, on the turf of the court. Yeah, we here for the sport, so take your mask off so I can hear your ass talk. Let me hear you explain. Hold the thoughts on your brain. Is your ass smart? Spit facts and real talk. I need that shit from the street that make you think real deep and take a long walk. This podcast is telling it with my man J.D. Fence and Skizzo Blizzo.
What it do, baby? Welcome back to the house, man. Mask Uncovered Podcast. You know what it is, man. J Defense, man. JAYDFENC on all platforms. Mask Uncovered Podcast on all platforms. Look us up, check us out, share, subscribe, like. Make sure y'all tuning in. And if y'all follow us and been watching, we got another part 2, man. Here we go, man. We got my man in the house, man. John C. Williams running for mayor out here in Brockton.
Peace.
What you got to say to the people, man?
We're back. We're still on the campaign trail. We're coming up about a week and a half away from the primary election. Our main message to the people is get out and vote. Pay attention to what's going on in our community. If you've been paying attention in Brockton, you know the schools have been having some issues. $14 million we have to explain. We still have to explain school safety. We're out a superintendent. We're out a principal at Brockton High School. Everything has been changed around. So we just have to pay attention and get out to the polls. Speak with your vote. Don't continue to have conversations. Speak with your vote.
So now it's crazy. If y'all haven't watched it, go back and watch part 1. Everything you were speaking on as far as the school system, about money being missing and so forth, it hit the news really big, especially here. I know that we have fans, you know, in different states, what have you. We're in Brockton, Massachusetts, and that's where he's running for mayor at. And this, everything he spoke on, you've seen it on the news heavily out here, where people are being laid off or fired pretty much because who was the two
administrative leave? The CFO and the assistant CFO and the superintendent is out on medical leave.
Man,
I mean, that's basic protection. When you go out on leave, they can't touch you. And so from there, you're going to see people retire and people, you know, do whatever they have to do to protect their livelihoods.
now let me see that poster real quick just so we can make sure that that's on film too. And what they call this, a billboard, banner, or what have you?
Just a sign, a window sign.
Window sign, just to make sure we know it's official whistle out here.
Yes, sir.
We're going to show this a few times throughout the podcast just to make sure. But, okay, so let's kind of get into the meat of it. Okay, so you've been on the campaign trail since the last podcast, probably a month and a half, 2 months ago, what have you. What has that been like? I mean, obviously it's something new for you. This is your first time running for a political office. Mm-hmm. So what were some of the ups and downs, and like what's this trail been?
It's been a grind, but the first interview that we did with you and, you know, your crowd, your audience, it really prepared me. And it's funny because after the podcast we had a long discussion. Mm-hmm. And I was acknowledging that's really going to prepare me for the trail. And it really did because, you know, you have people asking you questions about things you haven't even thought about. And you have to be ready for that. But also, Skiz had made a really, really deep point about our people, black people in the community, and our aversion to voting and the voting process, right? Mm-hmm. And you find that, and you find yourself, or I find myself, really like trying to sell myself to my own people, and that becomes frustrating at times. But I've learned to just keep my head down, stick with the facts, and those who are going to be open are going to be open. I've seen people, after coming back to them a second and third time, them changing their minds and being more receptive to the message.
Well, can you expound on that just a little bit? Because I think that you're right. We are, it seems, I don't want to just, we accept white or we accept right or we accept the past. So when we see something new, we question it a little bit more, but also we're typically more harder on our own people. So I definitely agree with that. So has it been that people are trying to pull the best out of you? Has it been more of a hate type of situation? Like what were those barricades or what were those issues you think you faced where like the second time you proved yourself wrong? Like if you could give an example or just an idea.
Yeah, well, there's a few different things. You know, one thing being that I'm not going to be a part of the voting process. It doesn't work for us. Nothing works for us,
okay.
right? And usually that's based in fear and self doubt that we're never going to pass that point of actually getting elected, right? After, seeing me on different forums, the NAACP forum, a couple news interviews, speaking at the school committee meeting, people have messaged me like, listen, you got the vote of me and everybody in my household. We're going to get out there and vote. But also, after going back a couple of times, people have run into friends, run into people that they know and said, oh, yeah, somebody told me about you. And they've been more receptive when I come back. But you still have those hardcore, I'm not being a part of the process. And there's nothing you can say to make me change my mind.
So it's been pretty much show and prove, right? Like, because
Absolutely.
anybody, like you said, could throw their hat in the ring, and we're also people that we don't just fall for the banana and tailpipe. We're just not going to sit back and say, oh, because my aunt knows this guy, or my brother knows this guy, I'm just going to vote for him. So I think that's a good position to be in because it makes you strong. It's like steel sharpens steel, iron sharpens iron. So going through that, do you feel like, especially with the first podcast and speaking to our great audience, which we still have in the house tonight, and y'all hear from them in a few, but being prepared and being ready, but also have you gotten better yourself?
Absolutely. And I urge people to go to johncwilliamsformayor.com.
Okay.
johncwilliamsformayor.com. And you go through the videos. Some of the videos actually, if you go through the Who is John Williams video, it takes you through that journey of me growing through this process and coming to an understanding of what it is I'm representing. And I think that even at the point of the first podcast, that hadn't fully sunk in yet.
Okay.
And it's more than just representing your people or representing your community where you're from. You're representing everybody in the city and all of their interests, right? And so you have to go out and do more research and study more things. And you come across intelligent people that will question you and hold you to the fire. Like you said, that's not going to just accept it because, hey, that's John. But also, being somebody that's from the community and has been in the public light for a long time, people have the opportunity to know who I am. So they have more of an opportunity to be able to judge me because they have more access to me than they do, say, our current mate.
Okay, I got a two-part question. The first, well, I'll start off with when you decided to run and the ideas that you wanted to speak on, the topics that you felt was prevalent or what you wanted to run on. Have that changed since you began? So did you find that was more secondary than what the people wanted? And are you now running on more of what you feel the people want? Or did you stick, so you could actually say what you felt like initially, and then has that changed, or the people know what you're running on?
If you pick up my sign again, our number one thing is, it's as easy as ABC, accountability for a better community. So the foundation of my campaign was accountability and transparency. So I think that it's become even more of a hot button issue in the city now, because we know we need to audit at least the schools. We should go for a full audit of the entire city. There should be more access and more transparency because with that, you don't allow for situations like overspending of $14 million. You know, the mismanagement that's gone on that we know of, and the stuff that we know will come out later.
So it's ironic, like you said, because that's what we start off with the podcast, and then we see what's happening with the Brockton school systems, and that's the first thing that I hear on the news. Like we need accountability, and some of the elected officials or what have you, are they elected or they put in those positions?
School committees elected.
Okay, so now they're saying the same words that you were spewing, on the initial podcast. So it almost doubled down on your ideas. Like it almost made. I gave you a call as soon as I seen it on the news. So it seemed like it was almost a battery pack, like to kind of say that what you're doing and what you're standing for and running for is exactly what we need.
Absolutely.
Did you feel that? Did you feel like you was like Superman, like because it kind of doubled down on what you was like? I mean, it's good.
I don't know about
back,
Superman, but it definitely revealed that I was on the right path because, as I've said from the beginning, I'm not a career politician. I didn't get into this like, look, I wanted to be mayor. That's not why I got into this. And on top of that, because my situation is the way it is, I'm not going to beat Bob Sullivan, the mayor, at the money game. I'm not going to put up more signs than him. I'm not going to raise more funds than him. I'm not going to do any of that. So in order to win this campaign, it's going to have to come from the people. And the people would have had to get engaged some way. And this is just a way that people can get engaged. It just shows that this campaign is bigger than me. It's bigger than anything that I could have came up with for a campaign strategy. This is what's supposed to be.
Okay.
So I have a question. Speaking a little bit more further on this $14 million discrepancy that has taken place. How did that actually affect our kids? Because it's involving the school district. And the second part of my question is, how do we mitigate this at this point? Like, what do we do?
Right. So, to answer the first part of your question, to see the effects, as I was saying the last time I was here, we got $73 million in, right? And so, you should be able to look at our system and say, ooh, we improved something. Ooh, they're doing better. They figured out ways to engage the kids after school, or they've set up these programs over here. We should be on the cutting edge of something, right? But you look at our band, we have one of the top bands, drama, all that in the country, but they're all underfunded, right? And so all of these programs, all the resources that go directly to our kids, they all have low to no funding. We still can't get tutors for kids in middle school, can't get tutors for kids in elementary school. We still don't know what to do with the students that just can't, because of their behavior, be in mainstream. We have all these issues and we can't take care of them. The main thing is, we can't address what's going on in our school environments, because growing up, we had teachers who were in school buildings for years. You could go talk about Mrs. Such and Such, and you had her, your daughter will have her, your auntie had her.
Right.
They're mainstays in the school and in the community. And that set a type of environment in the school that was academic. When you walked in, oh, I can't play with her, I can't play with him. And it set an environment. Now you can't do that because teachers are getting laid off every year. So if we can't have a proper academic environment, you got kids running around, we're not enforcing rules. When do we have the time, when do we have the resources to really structure for our kids a proper path to graduation? And it shows in the fact that we went from 26 to 30% retention rate in the ninth grade, right? We shouldn't be having these type of statistics, and we just got $73 million in it. It just shouldn't be. That's how it's affecting our kids. What we can do to mitigate some of this is start scaling back and start going back to old school education, mixed in with a modern approach to educating our kids. Because, and that's going to take a lot. I'm not saying that's something that can be done very easily, because we have to really sit down at the negotiation table with the teachers union. We have to sit down with the administrators of the school buildings, actual teachers, and everyone. Parents have to come to the table and really sit down and see what's best for our kids, because you come to a stalemate when you have just administrators, the school superintendents, negotiating with the teachers union, right? Because the teachers union is going to say everything that the teachers need, which is correct, but even the teachers some teachers don't agree with some of the things that the union are negotiating. And so you have to have parents there to be that other force, that balance point to say, listen, this is about our children. And so we need to revamp some of this. Just think about it. Our children now are able to process way faster than we could because they have access to more things, right? You sit them down in a 50-minute class, right? Whereas we had to sit in a 50-minute class because we had to learn from encyclopedias and everything else. So we had to sit in that 50-minute class to go through everything so everyone can get it. Whereas they have access to so much technology and so much information. 15 minutes into the class, they've already absorbed what they were supposed to for the day. And the rest of that class is going to be whatever that teacher has set for an environment in that class, right? And so we can revamp some of that, but we can't, because we have to have the same length of school day so we can pay the teachers the same amount per hour, because we can't shorten it and pay them more per hour, because they would never set that precedent. The superintendent would never set that precedent. And we can't say, all right, teachers, we're just going to shorten the day and you just take less money and you can go get a job, because that's not going to work either. And so with that stalemate, our kids are suffering because we can't go into modern day education, right? We can't go into putting kids on a direct path to what they're going to do for a livelihood, which is something that we should be doing now, right? At this point, we should be switching from some of the things that traditionally kids went into, because looking at AI and a lot of things that are gonna just X out a lot of jobs in the near future, right? Those are things that cities should be paying attention to ahead of time and not fall into the crisis that a lot of people will fall into in about 5 years.
So my next question is, do we suspect that some of this deficit is due to money that was supposed to be allocated towards the school being moved someplace else?
The school being moved someplace else?
No, the actual funding. So funding that was allocated towards the school, clearly they're over budget, whatever. But is it possible that some of this money that was actually allocated towards the schools moved to take care of something else, and now it wasn't recoupable, so they couldn't fill it back up?
I'm glad you said that, right? Because this is something else that's come out in this process. One thing that's happened in this process is a lot of information has come out. People are actually starting to dig and look into what's going on. And so we found that the Chapter 70 money, which is the state funding for the schools, when it comes into Brockton, it goes directly to the city general fund first. It goes to the city first, and then it goes to the schools. Now you would think they would pay it all out directly to the school. But they don't. They take theirs off of the top. And as a community, we can do a request of information for a Schedule 12 and look at what the city actually took out of that budget. I believe last year they took, in that 2023 budget, they took, I believe, 7 million in administrative costs alone. And so, yeah, they're taking every year. The unions had put out a document that said since 2018, the city has been giving the schools less and less from the city's portion of funding every year. I forget the percentage that it was, but it's less and less. So as we were getting that ARPA money and ESSER money and Student Opportunity Act money, instead of the schools being actually boosted by that, the city took out what they got from that. They took that out of what they were supposed to give to the schools. So the schools never really saw that money. The city saw it.
Is that considered theft?
It should be. I'm not sure legally what that is, but I know going into office, I don't want to touch anything until an agency comes in and turns over all of these books, and y'all say what it is. If somebody's got to go to jail, somebody's got to go to jail.
Now, go ahead.
So, as a parent of, that actually had 2 children in the Brockton School District, my children are no longer in the Brockton School District because they're past high school. But if I was a parent right now with children within the district, I would be very afraid.
Mm-hmm.
I would be asking a lot of questions. I would wonder how my child's education is going to suffer because of this. So what would you say to parents that are in that position now that are wondering, how did this happen? When did this happen? How is this going to affect my child? Is their school that they currently go to still going to be an option for them? Are they going to start closing schools? How do this? It could be hysteria within the next couple of weeks behind, this information that was recently released.
The number one thing as parents that should be done is to look at in these next couple of weeks and then a couple of months after that. September 19th is the primary election. To look to vote the people that are already in there out, right? We obviously need new perspective on this. But also get engaged. To get engaged. If you have a child in the school system, you have a right to be engaged in your school and in what's going on in the school district. And this stuff happens because they really just assume we are not going to watch anything. We're not going to be there. We're not going to look and see what's going on. Just think, the last time I was here, I was talking about all this stuff, and this is stuff I've been talking about for 2 years. And I'm in the public eye. I work with kids. I was in the school system, and parents weren't listening. People weren't listening and paying attention until they were forced to. And so the number one thing that we can do as parents and as citizens here is to get engaged and stay engaged. That's why I want to start the community oversight boards so people have an avenue to get engaged, right? Because it's one thing for me as somebody to say everybody needs to get engaged, but then you have to have an avenue to be engaged. And so we want not only an avenue just to be engaged, but that has teeth, that a board that's there that actually has teeth to do something if there's a problem. And so setting up these oversight boards for the departments in the city, including the mayor's office, is one of the things that I want to do so people have a reason to be engaged.
So why do you think that this information is coming out now? I mean, $14 million is not something that happened all in 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
Why now? This could have been something that was released 2 years from now, so it could have been $21 million.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think caused this information to kind of be disclosed now?
I couldn't even tell you because the people that are the gatekeepers to this information, they release it or don't release it for whatever reasons that they want to. I just say for the people, pay attention. You know, I don't know why it was released now because it seems like just perfect timing as far as from a campaign standpoint. So I don't know. Is there someone in there? Was it someone in the that has this information in the school department that was going to leak it or did leak it, and they were forced to address it? I don't know. I don't know. But I'm glad that they did. Now we have to look at it for what it actually is and say, are we willing to have leaders in these positions that are clearly mismanaged our money?
It's kind of weird, but speaking back on how you were saying that almost revamping the education system due to new technology, you would think that the same should apply with the adults in this situation, right? Like, so these boards and these committees, with this technology, everything should be up front. Like, there's no way in the world I can go 1 year without knowing how much money was allocated to the school system, how much money should have been. And so it almost reminded me of the best series, The Wire, how when the new mayor took over, it's like, okay, so who's responsible for this big deficit, right?
Remember, it was a school deficit in that show.
Yes,
It was
that's
a
exactly
school department.
right. And it's like, okay, so it wasn't the mayor, so no one wanted to, take responsibility for how we got here. And this show was what, the early 2000s?
Yeah.
So like now, how do we have a situation where the adults are not even behaving like adults? Like, why isn't this always up front? So I like the idea of what you were saying, okay, this oversight, this board with that really has teeth, that this information, no one should be able to send any money to no other department, no other funding, like, because I remember you were saying something about they tried to get a new school bus system and whatever. Like, so these things should be going through votes or what have you, or going through some type of committee where we're all aware of what we chose. Like, sometimes you could choose the wrong idea. Sometimes you have a bright idea and it just doesn't work out, but you had the right intentions behind it. So I'm not even saying that didn't happen in this case. Somebody was like, okay, because at least that's what Mike Sullivan said, who's the superintendent or who's on leave now. He was saying that he almost misappropriated the funds, but he said it all went back to the kids. That's what he was defending. They're like, okay, I made these choices. They might have been the wrong choices. And so could he be at fault? Like, I think that at some point he has to lay out what those choices were. Like, I mean, he did say it was like, policing in the schools and paying teachers, what have you. But just to say those words, we should be able to have some documentation. Like, we should be able to sit down and talk to these people. So is that something that you're looking at? I know it takes time, but like establishing something like that.
Well, remember the last time I was here, I spoke about OpenGov, right?
Okay, yeah.
Which is putting your budget on the cloud, right?
Sure.
So in a situation like this, the school department's budget will be on the cloud, because I don't know if you've ever gone to look at the budget for the city or the budget for the school department. And in order to look it up, because the budget that we're talking about, you're talking about just under $221 million, right?
That's all.
That's all. But when you look at it and you have to go through the line items to find out where that money went, and like I had to spend days. You have to go through, I think it's a 400 and something page document.
So it's like reading the
right, you gotta go through. Yeah, you gotta go check everything. Then you gotta check it against the 22 budget, the 21 budget, and then the budget that's coming up, right? The projected budget of 24, which we had already projected an $18 million deficit. And we kept asking, how are you projecting $18 million deficit? Remember the last episode?
Yes.
We're projecting an $18 million deficit, but we haven't hit the fiscal cliff yet. How is that possible? They had to have overspent, and we went over that. And now this is coming out.
So I want to play devil's advocate. And I don't have all of the specifics or details, and I don't think anybody does, because they haven't come out with any definitive answers or information to justify and or explain what happened to this $14 million. But there's a couple of things that come to mind. That's number one, inflation. Number two, teachers and union. Was this year a year that teachers got automatic raises because of the union? Is this a year that there was that the bargaining unit with the union negotiated the teacher's salary for that year prior to the budget being sent or being done? The other piece is, now you're talking about school police officers and Brockton police officers. Has salaries gone up because of inflation and the cost of living? So my point in saying that is to say, just to play devil's advocate, if the person that made the decision to spend the money and they feel comfortable and confident in their decisions, did they make a decision to spend the additional funds in areas that it wasn't designated for, because let's just say there were more violent incidents at the high school in the last year than in previous years? Because I think that Brockton High kind of made the news on a couple of occasions with assaults, with girls videotaping the assaults. I even think that there might have even been a shooting. So now, in order to prevent from being on the news and to keep the students safe so that parents won't say, we can't send our kid to the school, which then translates into you're going to lose funding because you're losing students. Did he make the decision and say, you know what, it doesn't matter. If I don't get this under control, we won't have a school. Do you know what I'm saying? So I'm just playing devil's advocate. And I'm more curious because like I said, with inflation, the cost of food has gone through the roof exponentially. So that means that the school lunch or whatever food that the school is supplying, that has also increased in cost. And somebody has to make up for that subsidy. Because if a lot of the kids that go to the school are on public assistance or are immigrants that are in a not an impoverished home, but like they're below the poverty line, then where's the money going to come from to feed the students? You know what I mean? So I'm just, like I said, I'm playing devil's advocate because although $14 million sounds like a lot of money, when you do the math and you add up just some of the fundamental things that we as regular civilians have felt the heat of with the inflation, I just wonder how much of those things play in. Because the other thing too that we're not thinking about is that we're coming out of a pandemic, and every student had to do remote learning.
Right.
Well, now you're talking about laptops. There's a cost for that. Now you're talking about, what about the kids that don't have internet at home? So I wonder how much of that fell on the school to provide those students with that. So this could
And
be
the teachers.
you know what I mean? Yeah, because that's right, because the teachers as well.
Right.
So my point is that this could have been a snowball effect from the pandemic, and it's just a matter of the person that was in charge of the fiscal budget, who's supposed to manage the budget, keep track of the budget, and where the funds out of specific buckets were being dispersed. If that person wasn't qualified to do the job to begin with, then they're not gonna know how to manage the funds. They're not gonna know how to say, let me create a spreadsheet so that I can keep track of where the funds are going. Whether that comes from the mayor's office or it comes from the actual school committee or the school staff itself. I'm not exactly sure how that plays into it. So that's all I have to say on that. But I'm curious to find, because I find it hard to believe that someone would feel confident and passionate enough to come out and say publicly, I feel comfortable with the decisions that I made. It takes a lot to do that.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I'm glad you said that because that was a lot and all of it was relevant. And if I don't speak to something, let me know because everything you said.
I wasn't, my apologies, I was kind of just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah,
just
but
throwing
in
out a
playing-
couple of ideas.
In playing devil's advocate, because see, we cannot underestimate our intelligence, right? A lot of this stuff is basic, so basic that you name, if you add transportation department in there and the buses in middle school sports, you pretty much wrapped up everything that was spent, in this overspending.
Because let's not forget, there was a shortage of bus drivers
Right.
Yeah.
ever since the pandemic. And they had to pay bus drivers more money to attract people to even want to take that job.
Right, and in the first place, we shouldn't have even bought the buses and started the
Oh yeah, that's
transportation
right, you
company.
mentioned that in the
We
last
should have
part.
never did that because we didn't take into account the maintenance of those buses. We didn't take into account the drivers. We didn't take into account how much we would have had to spend on just leasing the property for the transportation department and housing the buses. But also, starting with, you spoke about the renegotiation of
Teachers have.
the teachers, the bargaining agreement, right? You did have something significant happen there. They renegotiated, and this has to be predicated with everything that I'm talking about as far as an increase in funding or an increase in salary or anything. It's all based upon the fact that we got this ARPA money in, which came in to help us reopen and help us to pay for the laptops and the jet packs, the little internet packs, and all of that. We got funded in to help with that, right? When we got that money in, it was looked at like we can take care of all of this. And so we said paras are being underpaid, paraprofessionals are being underpaid, MTAs are being underpaid, and so they raised their salaries up. They took teachers and gave some teachers some emergency licenses, especially some minority teachers, some emergency teachers licenses. We'll get back to that because that's an important thing. And they did install the metal detectors in the high school. I believe they were $17,000 a piece, and they put 2 at every
They
door.
just now?
No, they did that a couple of years ago.
Oh, well.
Right. So there were some things done with that money, right? But then you have to look at where, it's especially when you go into the transportation, because all that other stuff you would want them to make your school safer, right? You would want them to put in socio-emotional programming to help with the kids coming back from the pandemic. You would want those things in your school, right? But when you have a transportation contract already, and if you go back to the old school committees, they used to argue about this all the time. First student has a monopoly on the contract, and they were going back and forth. So they took this opportunity while they got some money to go out and get a transportation department, which if you look at the numbers of what they were spending every year, it's unbelievable. We've budgeted out $16 million this year for the transportation department, and they already know it's going to go over budget, right? They know it's going to go over budget, but they budget everything out to the dollar. So if it goes 20,000 over in one department, you've gone 20,000 over budget right there, right? And so that's how that's how you get to the 14 million, because those, when you talk about, 100,000, 200,000, you put some of those together, now you're talking about 1.5 million,
Right.
2.6 million.
Right.
You put those together, it all adds up.
Domino effect.
And to go back to your point, there is no one person that makes that decision and that's it. You have at least 22 people beyond, 21 people beyond Mike Thomas, the school superintendent, whose eyes have to be on that, because you have the 7 school committee members, and then the mayor, who is the head of the school committee, the de facto chairman of the school committee, which I believe is a conflict of interest, but that's a whole other thing. Then you have the 11 city councilors who have to look at the budget in total, which the school department budget is a part of that, unless you're just saying, oh, we believe the school committee and they don't need any oversight. You have them, then you have the city auditor, and you have the school department CFO, Aldo Petronia, right? And so you have all of these people who have to look at this and say, all right, we're going to spend this and we're going to approve this. The school committee has to approve everything that Mike Thomas has put out there. Plus, they have to approve the things that they've recommended, right? And so somebody, Aldo, the CFO, should have been the first one that said, no, we have to stop spending now. Because if you have a personal accountant, right, and you're making money, say you're making millions, right, and you can have your estate and you got to pay for everything. You're not keeping track of every dollar, but that's why you hire an accountant. And your accountant will hit you up like, hey, listen, you got to stop spending. I know you want to get that car, but you can't get that car right now because you're going over budget. You won't have a house to live in if you make that purchase. So you can't make that purchase. That's your job. We're paying y'all hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to make these decisions. And then throw on top of that, for the school committee that's supposed to be watching this, they just tripled their salary this year. Wow. The city council just had their salary, just approved for their salary to be tripled this year.
And why is $14 million deficit?
And so sitting on top of that, we have a school committee tripling their salary while we're in the deficit.
Now, with that said, with the opponents that you're running against, or what have you, have y'all had, like, I know it's not like presidential debates and stuff like that. Have y'all had run-ins with like each other, like where, like, you guys were at the same speaking place? Have you seen what these other guys' platforms are? Have those changed? Are they following suit? Like, are you following suit? Like, well, as far as you're running for mayor, so I want that platform itself. How's that been, and what do you see the difference between your running mates?
Well, we had the NAACP forum a couple of weeks ago,
And that entails all you guys.
all of us, everyone who committed to show up. The mayor didn't choose to come to that forum. I don't know how in the city that has the highest black population in percentage in New England, you choose not to come to the NAACP forum, but the people should take that message. But during that, I expressed a lot of things about this that actually came out a few days after that forum. My competitors, Fred Fontaine, who is a businessman here in Brockton, friend of mine. I believe he's a good man, and he has some good ideas. I don't think that he has the ideas that I have as far as the schools and some of the revolutionary ideas that I have. Hamilton Rodriguez, who owns George's, I'd rather not even speak on him.
Well, but speaking on him, didn't he come out didn't he say some derogatory? I think he used a word that
Yeah.
typically in the urban community is used. And
You know, and why I say, I would choose not to, because as a fellow brother in the community, I've sat with him a couple of times before, he made those statements. And then I had.
well, for the people that don't know, what statement did he make, and
He's
where did
been-
he make that statement?
So online, he's been using racially derogatory language, calling people out, calling them monkeys, and saying that they eat fried chicken and watermelon, posted the little Sambo book, things like that. He's a Republican. He's a Trump following Republican. And to me,
And this was old texts or old social media posts?
No,
Or these
this
new
is
posts?
recent posts.
And he's posting something like, y'all niggas need to get out here and vote. Like, what is he?
No.
what is he-
He's personally attacking, like, one of the guys running. He posted a picture of a monkey. He said that monkeys eat peanuts, love to eat peanuts, and the mayor's paying them in fried chicken and watermelon to go against them.
Wow.
And so,
And what's his name again?
Hamilton Rodriguez.
Hamilton Rodriguez.
I don't think that he'll be in the race for too much longer, so I don't pay too much attention to it. I did address him at the NAACP forum, which turned into something because somebody had reported it. Well, I didn't address him. I just refused to shake his hand, and he threw a little temper tantrum. But for me, that's just a distraction from the goal. The current mayor, is the goal. We want new leadership, and so I don't feel that the guys running against me have the Brockton roots that I have. I don't think they have the finger on the pulse of what's needed for Brockton right now or going into the future. And so, if I were a Brocktonian looking at this campaign, I would really sit and look at. Go to John Williams for Mayor.com, John C. Williams for Mayor.com, and you can see the videos on my views on a lot of the things that are going on in our community, and see if it speaks to you. If not, if I haven't addressed something like that, you can go to the Contact John Williams tab that goes right to my email, and I'll be back in touch with you, and we can figure out, what I feel about that issue.
Now, I don't know for a fact, but I don't think that that's available. Like, they don't have, like, pre-poll numbers, like, who's running at 50%, 20%, right? So I'm accurate with that.
Yeah, they don't have that.
So what would you say the energy has been like since you started with the John C. Williams campaign? Over the last couple of months, like, what is that energy, that feel been like? Have you been feeling a sway one way or the other?
It's building, definitely. The swell is building in my favor, especially with these new revelations of it, the speaking engagements that I've had. I believe that the swell, I've definitely gotten more of a response from different communities as well. So, it's gonna be very difficult, getting through the primary. It's gonna be very difficult to face me in the general election.
That's a good sign. So you feel the energy's here, and again, like, I always want to make sure that we're, showing this. And also, some of those places that you spoke at, are those available? Is that posted on the John C. Williams website, or how can people see some of these because a lot of people can't make it out there to each event, what have you. So these are recorded, and you actually post these things somewhere where they can see these.
Yeah, everything goes right up on John C. Williams for mayor. Usually the day after. So I just spoke at the school committee meeting on Tuesday.
Yeah.
That was up by Thursday. So all of those things are up. You can Google my name. I've had a couple of news articles, news clips over the last week with Fox and Channel 10. And so we're promoting the message, and we're getting out there, speaking the truth. And these speaking engagements, the NAACP forum was a forum, but most of the things I'm speaking at is school committee meetings and really putting in the work and putting in the action for the city. So it's not so much just I'm speaking somewhere, it's I'm continuing to do the work. It just happens to be on camera.
That's a good sign. And johncwilliams.com. John C. Williams, what is it?
johncwilliamsformayor.com. Yes, sir.
johncwilliamsformayor.com. We want to definitely show this again, as always. So, we definitely don't want to hold you. I know that you have the campaign trail to get back to. Any last questions, anything?
No, thank you so much for coming and sharing more of your time with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I just also want to put out there to the candidates. I know my guy Jed Horesco that I'm supporting for City Council at large. Jamal Brathwaite, I'm supporting for City Council at large. Ellie Teixeira running in Ward 5 for City Council. Anna Oliver running in Ward 3 for School Committee. Jerson Montero running in Ward 3 for City Council. I want to encourage the people that's running. Please forgive me if I forgot your name and what you're running for, and I support you. But I encourage you to reach out to Jay and get on this podcast. Get in this environment, because I've done the rounds. And we have other great podcasts in the area, other great shows. But what I've got here, I can't speak about anybody else. But what I get when I come here, I know I'm gonna test, where I'm at. You don't get the type of questions like you get from the audience you get here, and your ability to express your platform is unmatched. So hit up J Defense and make sure you get on Mask Uncovered so you can see where you're at as far as this campaign.
Definitely, and I was going to say that, so I'm glad you said that, because you're more than welcome, all you guys, we definitely want to hear your side of the story, hear your platforms you're running on, Mask Uncovered podcast. I definitely want to say thank you again, Mr. John C. Williams. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Good luck in the primaries. And again, man, this is Mask Uncovered podcast. Definitely check out part 1 if you haven't seen it already, because you'll see everything that he spoke about is coming to pass, what have you. And it's been on the news. He has the clippings out there. We'll definitely continue to post those things also. But again, man, check us out, Mask Uncovered podcast, man. We want to say thank you again to the audience. Thank you again for showing up and being a part of. So tune in, man. Please like, share, subscribe, man. Again, peace.